Ever wonder how people can interpret the same event, like, so differently? Like, two people see the same movie, and one person's, like, in tears, and the other's bored stiff.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that's the kind of puzzle that Interpretive Phenomenological Analysis, or
Nice.
IPA, tries to solve.
Yeah.
You've sent us a whole stack of stuff about this,
Uh-huh.
articles, essays, even a sociology website.
Wow.
Looks like you're really trying to get a handle on this whole, like, understanding human experience thing.
Yeah, it is fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
How we each create our own meaning out of life's events.
Right.
And IPA is like a key
Yeah.
to unlock those individual interpretations, especially when it comes to those big, impactful experiences.
Okay, so before we get lost in all the academic jargon,
Okay.
let's break it down. What is IPA in a nutshell?
So think of it like this. Imagine a car accident.
Okay.
The police report will give you the facts,
Right.
seed, point of impact, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But IPA wants to know how the people involved experienced the crash. What thoughts and emotions flooded them in that moment?
Yeah.
How did it change their view of driving, maybe even of life?
So it's not just about the objective event.
Yeah,
It's about the subjective impact,
exactly.
how each person makes sense of it. Right.
Yeah, IPA is all about exploring those individual interpretations, those lived experiences, as they're often called.
I see where the interpretive part comes in, but what about phenomenological?
Yeah.
That one sounds a bit intimidating.
It's simpler than it sounds.
Okay.
Phenomenology is really just about how we experience things through our senses and perceptions.
Okay.
Like, that apple you eat isn't just an apple, it's your apple, with your unique experience of its taste,
Right.
its texture, and even the memories it might evoke.
So putting it all together, IPA is trying to understand those unique personal experiences, especially the ones that really shape us.
That's the core of it. It's a deep dive into how people make meaning out of their world, particularly those events that leave a lasting impact.
Now I'm curious, how does IPA differ from other types of research, especially those that also deal with people's experiences?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So while other qualitative research methods like surveys or even some types of interviews
Right.
might look for broad patterns across a large group,
Mm-hmm.
IPA zooms in on the individual.
Okay.
Think of it as the difference between a wide-angle lens and a microscope.
Oh, okay.
You're not aiming for generalizability. You're trying to capture the richness and depth of a single person's experience,
Right.
or perhaps a very small group with a shared experience.
So it's all about nuance and those aha moments that come from understanding someone's perspective in detail.
Precisely. And this is where the double hermeneutic comes in.
Okay.
Think of it like translating a translation.
Okay.
The participant is interpreting their own experience, and then the researcher is interpreting the participant's interpretation. It's a layered process of understanding.
Okay, that makes the double part a lot clearer. Now, one of the articles you sent mentioned that IPA has its roots in psychology
Yes.
and was developed back in the 1990s.
Hmm.
What led to its emergence as a research method?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
IPA emerged at a time when researchers were starting to realize that traditional quantitative methods,
Right.
those relying heavily on statistics and numbers,
Yeah.
weren't capturing the full picture of human experience.
Yep.
They needed a way to systematically explore those subjective personal meanings that people create.
So it was a response to this growing awareness that, hey, numbers only tell part of the story.
Yeah,
We need to hear people's stories, understand their world from the inside out.
absolutely. Researchers needed a tool specifically designed to explore the nuances of how individuals perceive and understand their world.
Oh, okay.
And that's where IPA came in.
It sounds like a pretty radical departure from the traditional scientific approach.
Yeah,
I bet there were some raised eyebrows when IPA first appeared on the scene.
you can bet there were.
Yeah.
But IPA was filling a crucial gap,
Right.
offering a way to study those aspects of human experience that had previously been difficult to capture with traditional methods.
Yeah.
And its philosophical underpinnings played a big role in shaping this new approach.
Now, you mentioned philosophical underpinnings.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
I have to admit, the philosophy side of research can sometimes feel a bit abstract.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we'll keep it grounded.
Okay.
IPA draws heavily from two key areas of philosophy, phenomenology, and hermeneutics.
Okay.
We've already touched on phenomenology.
Right.
But in essence, It's about understanding the world as it's experienced, how things appear to our consciousness.
So, like, my experience of drinking coffee is different from yours.
Exactly.
Even if we're sipping on the same brew.
Yeah, we each bring our own history, emotions, and perceptions to that experience.
Right.
Now, hermeneutics comes in when we try to interpret those individual experiences.
Okay.
It acknowledges that we don't experience the world objectively, but always through our own unique lens, influenced by our culture, our beliefs, and past experiences.
So, like, my love of strong black coffee might be tied to memories of my Italian grandmother brewing it in her tiny kitchen.
Right.
It's not just about the caffeine, it's about the meaning I've attached to it.
You got it.
Yeah.
And that's why IPA is so fascinating. It acknowledges that our experiences are never neutral.
Right.
They're always infused with meaning.
This is starting to paint a much clearer picture of what makes IPA unique.
Good.
So we've got the what and the why. Now I'm really curious about the how.
Okay.
How does an IPA study actually work in practice?
Well, it starts with choosing the right participants.
Okay.
You need people who have direct experience with the phenomenon you're studying.
Right.
And unlike some research that seeks a large, diverse sample, IPA often focuses on a small, homogeneous group,
Okay.
allowing for a deep dive into their shared experiences.
I'm guessing interviews are the main way to gather data, right?
You're on the right track. Semi-structured interviews are indeed very common in IPA. They allow for a flexible conversational approach, encouraging participants to share their experiences in depth.
So it's less about asking a set list of questions, more about creating a space for open, in-depth conversation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the researchers actively listening, prompting for clarification, and following the participants' lead to uncover those rich layers of meaning.
I can imagine those interviews generating a treasure trove of data. What happens next?
That's where the real work begins.
Yeah.
First, those interviews are transcribed, capturing every word and nuance.
Okay.
Then the researcher immerses himself in the data,
Right.
reading and rereading those transcripts, looking for emerging themes and patterns in the participants' stories.
This sounds like a pretty intensive process.
It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
Oh, okay.
IPA is all about that close, careful attention to detail, teasing out the subtle meanings that might be missed with a more superficial approach.
So it's not just about identifying themes, it's about understanding the why behind those themes.
Yeah.
The individual interpretations that give them life.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
Oh, okay.
We'll explore the steps involved in analyzing IPA data,
Right.
those aha moments of insight,
Yeah.
and the unique challenges of making sense of such rich, complex information.
Sounds fascinating. Can't wait to dig deeper into that process and see how those individual stories come together to create a powerful understanding of the human experience. We'll see you back here soon for part 2.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into interpretive phenomenological analysis. Last time we talked about how IPA focuses on those unique individual interpretations of events, especially those that have a big impact on people's lives.
Yeah, that's right.
And we left off just as things were getting really interesting. The analysis of all that rich data gathered from those in-depth interviews.
Okay.
I'm picturing stacks of transcripts, highlighters everywhere.
Right.
What's the next step in the process?
Well, it's not quite as chaotic as you might imagine.
Okay.
Though the process is definitely rigorous, there's a real beauty to it as well.
Right.
Remember, IPA isn't about crunching numbers. It's about immersing yourself in those stories.
Okay.
Really getting a feel for the nuances of each person's experience.
So it's almost like becoming a detective.
Yeah.
Searching for clues in the language, the tone,
Right.
the way people describe their experiences.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And the first step is really just that.
Okay.
Reading and rereading those transcripts, letting the participant's voice wash over you,
Okay.
taking notes on what stands out, what seems significant.
Yeah.
It's about getting a holistic sense of their world.
I can imagine that's where the researcher's own background and knowledge comes into play.
Yeah.
Noticing certain details or making connections based on their own understanding of the topic.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important for IPA researchers to be aware of their own biases and assumptions,
Right.
to constantly reflect on how their own perspective might be shaping their interpretation of the data.
That makes sense. It's about being transparent and acknowledging that the researcher is also a participant in the process, in a way.
Right.
So once you've steeped yourself in those transcripts,
Yeah.
what comes next?
Well, that's when we start looking for patterns and themes,
Okay.
but not in the way you might think.
Okay.
It's not about simply counting how many times a particular word or idea pops up. It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
It's about identifying those clusters of meaning that reveal something deeper about how participants are making sense of their experiences.
So it's not just about what people say,
Right?
but about how they say it,
Yeah.
the language they use, the metaphors they employ, the connections they make.
You're getting it. It's about reading between the lines,
Yeah.
understanding the subtext,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing those patterns of meaning that might not be immediately obvious.
Okay, so you've identified some initial themes. What happens then? Is it a case of job done?
Not quite.
Okay.
This is where the iterative nature of IPA really comes into play.
Oh.
Remember, it's not a linear process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant back and forth between the data and the researcher's interpretation.
Right.
So you might start with a few broad themes.
Okay.
But as you delve deeper, you might refine those,
Mhm.
break them down into sub-themes,
Right.
or even discover entirely new themes that you hadn't noticed before.
So it's a bit like putting together a puzzle,
Yeah.
where each piece you find helps you see the bigger picture more clearly, but you're always open to rearranging those pieces as you go.
That's a great way to put it. And it's this constant refining, this back and forth, that makes IPA so rigorous.
Yeah.
It's not about jumping to conclusions.
Right.
It's about building a solid, grounded interpretation that's rooted in the data.
Now, you mentioned earlier that IPA often focuses on small homogeneous groups.
Right.
Is there ever a time when researchers might choose to include participants with more diverse experiences?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And it highlights an important point about the flexibility of IPA.
Okay.
While a lot of IPA research does indeed focus on shared experiences,
Mm-hmm.
there are times when researchers might choose to include participants with more diverse backgrounds or perspectives.
Okay.
This can be particularly valuable when studying complex social phenomena
Right.
or exploring how different groups interpret the same event or issue.
I can see how that could add another layer of richness to the analysis,
Yeah,
seeing how those individual interpretations are shaped by factors like culture, gender, or socioeconomic background.
exactly. And in those cases, the researcher would be looking for both commonalities and differences in those experiences,
Hey.
paying close attention to how individual interpretations intersect with those broader social and cultural contexts.
Okay, so we've got this rich data, we've identified these insightful themes.
Right.
Now, I'm curious, how are those findings actually presented?
Okay.
Is it all about writing up a dry academic report?
Well, a written report is certainly a common way to share IPA findings,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely not about being dry or inaccessible.
Okay.
Remember, IPA is all about capturing the richness of human experience,
Right.
and that should be reflected in how the findings are presented.
So it's about bringing those stories to life,
Yeah,
making them engaging and relatable for the reader.
precisely.
Mm-hmm.
A good IPA report will weave together those individual narratives with the researcher's analysis,
Okay.
using vivid language,
Mm-hmm.
direct quotes from participants,
Right.
and even creative ways to visually represent those themes and connections.
Okay.
It's about inviting the reader into that world of experience,
Right.
not just presenting them with a list of facts.
That makes sense. It's about conveying not just the what of the findings,
Yeah.
but also the how and the why, those nuanced interpretations that make IPA so unique.
You've got it. And that's what makes IPA so powerful.
Yeah.
It's a method that honors both the individuality of human experience
Hmm.
and the potential for those experiences to illuminate broader social issues,
Right.
challenge assumptions, and even inspire change.
Speaking of broader implications,
Yeah.
one thing I've been wondering about is how IPA findings are actually used in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about its value for understanding complex issues,
Right.
but how does that knowledge translate into action?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And it's one that IPA researchers are increasingly grappling with.
Okay.
Remember, IPA isn't just about generating knowledge for its own sake.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge to make a difference.
Okay.
And there are several ways that IPA findings can be applied in real-world settings.
Okay. I'm all ears.
Okay.
Give me some examples.
Well, one area where IPA has been particularly influential is in healthcare.
Okay.
By understanding how patients experience illness, healthcare providers can develop more patient-centered approaches to care.
I can see how that would be incredibly valuable. It's about moving beyond treating the disease to really understanding the person living with the disease.
Exactly. For example, IPA research has been used to understand the emotional and social impact of chronic illnesses, like cancer, revealing how patients cope with diagnosis, treatment,
Right.
and the long-term effects on their lives.
Right.
These insights have then been used to develop support programs,
Okay.
improve communication between doctors and patients,
Right.
and even inform policy decisions related to healthcare access and resources.
So it's not just about understanding the disease in a clinical sense.
Yeah,
It's about understanding the lived experience of having that disease
exactly.
and using those insights to improve care.
That's right. And this same principle can be applied in other fields as well.
Okay.
For example, in education,
Hmm.
IPA has been used to explore students' experiences of learning,
Okay.
leading to the development of more effective teaching strategies and support services.
That's fascinating.
Yeah,
It's like saying, let's stop guessing what students need and actually ask them about their experiences,
right.
understand their challenges and motivations.
Exactly. And this is where IPA really shines.
Yeah.
It's a way to amplify those voices that are often overlooked or marginalized,
Right.
giving them a platform to share their stories and contribute to positive change.
Okay, so we've talked about applications in healthcare and education.
Mm-hmm.
Any other areas where IPA is making a difference?
Well, IPA is also increasingly being used in fields like social work, policy development,
Okay.
and even business. For
Wow.
example, in social work,
Mm-hmm.
IPA has been used to understand the experiences of individuals experiencing homelessness,
Right.
leading to the development of more effective interventions and support services.
I can see how IPA would be really valuable for social work,
Yeah.
where it's so crucial to understand the individual's context and build relationships based on empathy and understanding.
Absolutely. And in the business world,
Yeah.
IPA is being used to gain insights into customer experiences,
Okay.
leading to more effective marketing strategies and product development.
It's interesting to see how IPA is finding its way into such diverse fields.
Yeah.
It really speaks to its power as a research method,
Right.
its ability to uncover those hidden layers of meaning that can inform positive change.
That's right. And this is why IPA is so exciting. It's a relatively new approach,
Mm-hmm.
but it's already making a significant impact across a wide range of fields.
Okay. We've explored a lot about IPA so far. Its philosophical roots, the process of data analysis, and even some real-world applications.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to come back to a question that's been lingering in my mind.
Okay.
What does IPA ultimately teach us about the nature of knowledge?
Okay.
It seems like it challenges some of our traditional assumptions about objectivity and truth.
That's a brilliant observation.
Yeah.
And it goes to the heart of what makes IPA so valuable.
Okay.
You see, IPA forces us to confront the fact there is no single objective truth. Reality is always experienced and interpreted through individual lenses,
Mm-hmm.
shaped by our unique backgrounds, beliefs, and values.
So it's not about claiming to have the right answer,
Right.
but about acknowledging the multiplicity of perspectives and interpretations.
Precisely. And that's where the power of IPA lies.
Okay.
It encourages us to listen deeply to others,
Mm-hmm.
to be open to different ways of seeing the world,
Right.
and to recognize that true understanding comes from engaging with those diverse perspectives.
It seems like in a world that's increasingly polarized and divided,
Yeah.
IPA offers a much-needed antidote.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds us of the importance of empathy, open-mindedness,
Right.
and the constant pursuit of understanding.
Beautifully put. And that's a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
where we'll explore some of the broader implications of IPA research
Yeah.
and consider some of the big questions it raises about the nature of knowledge, understanding,
Yeah.
and the human experience.
I'm eager to keep exploring those big questions with you. For those of you listening, as we transition to the final part of our deep dive, consider this.
Okay.
How might IPA contribute to a more inclusive and just society? And what role can it play in bridging divides and fostering empathy in a world that often feels fragmented?
Right.
We'll be right back with you to continue our exploration.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into IPA. I'm still thinking about that last point, about how IPA highlights that there isn't just one right answer, one objective truth. It seems particularly relevant in our world right now, where everything feels so divided.
Yeah, you've hit on something really important there. IPA isn't just an academic exercise.
Right.
It's a way of approaching the world with curiosity, empathy, and a willingness to see things from multiple perspectives.
And we left off talking about IPA's potential to make a real difference, not just in understanding, but in action. Can we dig into that a bit more? Sure. What are some specific examples of how IPA findings have actually led to positive change? Absolutely. One area where we're seeing a real impact is in healthcare, especially when it comes to chronic illness.
Okay.
For years, the focus was on treating the disease itself.
Right.
But IPA research has shown us how crucial it is to understand the patient's whole experience, their emotional, social, even spiritual needs.
So it's not just about fixing the body, it's about supporting the person living with the illness.
Exactly. One study that comes to mind explored the experiences of people living with chronic pain.
Okay.
Using IPA, researchers discovered that patients often felt dismissed by doctors, like their pain wasn't taken seriously.
Oh, wow.
This led to feelings of isolation and frustration,
Right.
which actually worsened their suffering.
That's heartbreaking, but it makes perfect sense. If you don't feel heard, how can you feel truly cared for?
Right. And that's where IPA can be so powerful.
Yeah.
By illuminating these experiences, it can lead to real change.
Yeah.
In this case, the findings led to the development of communication training for physicians, focusing on empathetic listening skills and validating patients' experiences.
Wow. So those individual stories, those deeply personal interpretations can actually ripple out and impact healthcare practices on a larger scale.
Absolutely. And we're seeing similar things happening in other fields as well.
Okay.
In education, for example,
Mm-hmm.
IPA research has been used to understand the experiences of students from marginalized communities, revealing the systemic barriers they face.
So it's not just about individual struggles. It's about identifying those patterns of inequality that need to be addressed.
Precisely. And these insights can then inform policies and practices aimed at creating a more equitable and inclusive learning environment for all students.
This is making me realize that IPA is about so much more than just collecting data.
Right?
It's about using those individual narratives to advocate for positive change, to give voice to those who are often unheard.
You're exactly right. IPA is a tool for social justice, for understanding and addressing those systemic issues that impact people's lives.
It's pretty incredible to think that a research method can have that kind of impact. But I'm also wondering, are there any areas where IPA might be particularly well suited,
Yeah.
where its strengths really shine?
One area that immediately comes to mind is understanding the experiences of marginalized groups.
Okay.
Think about the experiences of refugees, people with disabilities, or individuals from LGBTQ plus communities.
Right.
These are groups whose voices are often silenced or misrepresented in mainstream narratives.
So IPA can help to amplify those voices, to ensure they're heard and understood on their own terms.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly powerful, not just for those individuals, but for society as a whole.
Right.
By gaining a deeper understanding of these experiences, we can challenge our own assumptions, dismantle harmful stereotypes, and create a more just and compassionate world.
Okay, as we wrap up our deep dive into IPA,
Okay.
I want to come back to something you said earlier about the importance of empathy. It seems like that's a key takeaway from everything we've discussed.
Absolutely. IPA reminds us that true understanding comes from listening deeply to others,
Yeah.
from stepping outside of our own limited perspective and trying to see the world through their eyes. It's about acknowledging that our own experiences, while valid, are just one piece of a much larger, more complex puzzle.
It's almost like IPA is offering a roadmap for navigating this increasingly polarized world where empathy seems to be in short supply.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why I believe IPA is so crucial, not just as a research method, but as a way of being in the world. It encourages us to be curious,
Right.
to be humble, and to always approach others with an open mind and a listening heart.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive has not only been incredibly informative, it's been genuinely inspiring.
Oh, good.
It's given me a whole new appreciation for the power of individual stories,
Yeah.
the importance of listening, and the transformative potential of empathy.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners feel similarly inspired.
And for those of you listening, remember, IPA isn't just about academics or research. It's about a way of seeing the world, a way of connecting with others, and a way of building a more compassionate and understanding society. So keep asking questions, keep listening to those around you, and keep diving deep into the rich tapestry of human experience. Thanks for joining us on this journey.